In part 4 of the WCG Era Series, we take a look back at a groundbreaking series at the WCG. International cricket had arrived at the home of backyard cricket as the New Zealand Blackyards rolled into town. A new dawn for the game as Trans-Tasman rivals carved a new chapter in a rich sporting history for backyard cricketing supremacy. A series that ebbed and flowed, a series of real cricketing quality, but only one of these heavyweights would claim the title. So sit back and enjoy one of the biggest events ever seen at the WCG. This is the Trans-Tasman Series review from 2019, Breaking New Ground. After 4 successful years at the WCG, a new challenge was on the horizon. Season 5 would begin with international pedigree as Australia and New Zealand forged cricket's newest rivalry. The WCG would receive a facelift in anticipation for this landmark event. And as our visitors rolled into town, it was time to get this show on the road. The Trans-Tasman Backyard Cricket Series would be contested over 2 days, with each fixture allocated points to determine an overall winner. Friday would see the test match leg of the series with 6 points up for grabs, and Saturday would see 23 of the 29 points up for grabs in the limited overs leg of the series. 2 captains exchanging pleasantries before the toss. The Kiwis' day would get off to a poor start as the Aussies would win the toss and have no hesitation in batting first. So a strong side for the Aussies, who had a mixture of old and new. Scott and White headlighting the Aussies lineup, with exciting all-rounder Ryan Schaefer and Justin Brooke earning call-ups for this international series. And as for the tourists, their squad would largely comprise members of the OGs Hawke's Bay and Fitzroy Falcons, both sides contesting the final of the Backyard Bash earlier in the year, with the 2 men from Auckland, skipper Viggo Rasmussen and the founder Logan Strange rounding out the lineup. The national anthems were sung loud and proud by both nations as it was time to get this contest underway. So it would be the Aussie skipper who would get this innings underway with the bat, and the Trans-Tasman series had begun. Scott would find his groove early as he put away some early loose bowling from the tourists to get the Aussies seemingly off to a strong start. But on 13, disaster. Scott failing to offer a stroke to the bowling of Shane Louis, who became the first international player to pick up a wicket at the WCG, to his side's delight. That would bring young Nathan Hancock to the crease, as the Kiwis would give the youngster an early reprieve. But the youngster couldn't make the most of it, as he succumbed in the next over the fence to become Logan Strange's first wicket of the tour. Michael Johnson would also find the boundary early on in his innings, but when he also succumbed over the fence, the Aussies were in trouble at 3 for 35. That would bring the Aussie vice skipper Matt White to the crease, who was yet to score a half century on his home patch, but he chose today of all days to stand up for the Aussies. He set about steadying the ship for the home side, dealing in boundaries in a typically aggressive innings, which wrestled the momentum back for the Aussies. Anything loose seemingly disappearing to the boundary, as the Kiwis had no answers, and White brought his half century up in style. A knock of pure class had rescued the Aussies from a dire situation, but White wasn't done yet. He would continue his aggressive approach with 3 figures in his sights. White would make his way to 91 before the cruelest of blows. White would tickle one down the leg side to the bowling of James Corder, 9 short of his century. But his knock had put the Aussies back in command of the Test match. But then something of a mini collapse for the Aussies, the highly rated Ryan Schaefer departing for 10. And when Justin Brooke failed to offer a stroke, once again to the bowling of Shane Louis, the Aussies were 6 down. Gavin Merrifield would take to the leg spin of Sam Fastia in his trademark aggressive approach to make his way to 10 before a smart bit of work from the Kiwis. A smart bit of work by vice skipper Tamati Kemp, finding Gavin Merrifield short of his ground. It would take key lower order contributions from firstly Josh Bolling with 23 and then Pat McGregor with 24 to push the Aussies beyond the 200 mark. It would be Satch Pryor who would pick up his first and the last wicket of the innings to remove Pat McGregor as the innings was brought to an end. So the Aussies would register the highest test total ever seen at the WCG with a strong first innings performance as they were bowled out for 209 in the 46th over. The innings was highlighted by Matt White's 91, a rescue act for the Aussies, and the hosts were in a commanding position as was now the Kiwis' turn with the blade. It would be the highly rated Sam Fastia who would face the music first up for the Kiwis, and the music he did face. Fastia getting a working over in the opening over before nicking off to Pat McGregor a few balls later, and the Kiwis were off to a disastrous start in the run chase as Fastia's first knock on Australian shores yielded 0. The Aussies were relentless in the opening overs of the Kiwi innings as Simon McFarlane was the next to face the music and would survive a massive shout early on. But after getting worked over by the pace of the Aussies, it would be the spin of Josh Bolling who would pick up the second wicket. McFarlane also gone for a duck, and the Kiwis were 2 for 1. That would bring Henry Miles of the Fitzroy Falcons to the crease, who would begin his innings positively with a flurry of boundaries to try and get the Kiwis back on track. Miles would make his way to 12 in aggressive fashion before he nicked off to Gavin Merrifield, and the Kiwis were 3 down, with the Aussies well on top in this test match leg of the series. 3 became 4 very quickly, thanks to a smart bit of work close in by Pat McGregor, who had made this somewhat of a signature move over the years at the WCG, and now he was doing it on the international stage. At 4 for 15, the Kiwis desperately needed someone to stand up, and that initially looked like it would be Satch Pryor, who looked like he was playing on a different surface to his teammates as he took the fight to the Aussies. Pryor looked in good nick, on his way to 18, before he went for one big stroke too many. El Basher picking up his first wicket for the series as the Kiwi slumped to 5 for 38, and when the vice skipper Tamati Kemp went for 10, they were 6 for 50 and in big trouble in their first innings. That would bring the Blackyards founder Logan Strange to the crease, who poked and prodded early on, but Strange would begin the rescue act for the tourists as he started to find his feet. With a heavily dominated offside game, he took it to the Australian bowlers, pouncing on anything short and wide as he made his way to 33. But Strange's long vigil at the crease would eventually come to an end. He would become Josh Bolling's second wicket for the test match. But importantly, he had given his side some hope of avoiding the follow-on. Shane Louis came to the crease and sought to continue the shift in momentum as he would begin his innings in aggressive fashion. That is until he copped an absolute jaffer from youngster Nathan Hancock to become his first wicket of the series, and the Kiwis still had some work to do to avoid the follow-on. Blake Lambert offered very little resistance as he became Johnson's second wicket for the test match, which would bring the skipper Viggo Rasmussen, the last man, to the crease, and with just one run to avoid the follow-on, The Aussies had thought they'd missed their opportunity as this sharp chance went to ground. But in the next over, skipper v skipper, Scott picking up the final Kiwi wicket as the Aussies now had a decision to make. So the New Zealand Blackyards bowled out for 104 in their first innings, with Blackyards founder Logan Strange, the only one offering real resistance, in a knock of 33 in an ordinary looking card for the tourists. That meant that the Kiwis fell one run short of avoiding the follow on, and the Aussies would ask their visitors to have another dig. So a change at the top of the order for this second innings for the Kiwis, and drama from the first delivery. Josh Bolling spilling a sitter to give Satch Pryor a reprieve on the very first delivery of the innings, of which he made zero use of, Kazis with the very next delivery. Bolling spared his blushes as White picked up Satch Pryor for a duck, but that would bring Sam Fastia to the crease. Fastia, on a pair for the test match, began his innings aggressively, taking the attack to the Aussie bowlers. He would hit boundary after boundary in an impressive display on foreign soil to give the Kiwis some hope. Fastia would register the first half century of the series for the tourists to show the Aussies that they were not going down without a fight. Fastia would make his way to 52 before copping a brute of a delivery from Matt White to become his second victim for the innings. The only other real resistance offered up by the Kiwis came in the shape of James Calder, who made an aggressive 38, but when he fell to the bowling of Matt White once again, there was little resistance after that. So a slightly better showing from the Kiwis in their second dig, as they were bowled out for 112, Sam Fastia with a well-made 52, and James Calder with 38, the only real resistance for the innings, as they barely made the Aussies have to bat again in this test match. And in fading light, the Aussies chased down the 8 required for victory. So it was the hosts who comfortably picked up the first 6 points on offer as they breezed to a 7-wicket victory in the test match leg of the series to send an ominous warning to the tourists that they were the kings of the backyard game. So a 6-0 lead for the Aussies as we moved into Super Saturday, as the hosts had made an early statement in this year's series. So we arrived at moving day for the series with 23 of the 29 points on offer, and a better start to the day for the Kiwis this time around as they won the toss and elected to bat first. The Aussies would make 5 changes to the side that won the test match on the previous day. White, Schaefer, McGregor, Merrifield and Brook all rested, as Daniel Hancock, George Paneros, Hamid Al-Bashar, Alex Stepien and Daniel Arnold made their first appearances for the series, as the Kiwis were 1 through 10. So the Kiwis looking to bounce back from yesterday's drubbing, and they would start like a shot out of a gun. Henry Miles, promoted to the top of the order, aided by some poor Australian fielding, was able to get his side off to a flyer. Stepien was unable to hold on to a sharp chance presented by Henry Miles, and he would set about making the Aussies pay with some blistering stroke play, as the Kiwis looked a totally different outfit to the one so comprehensively beaten on the previous day. The Aussies simply had no answer to the Henry Miles onslaught as he motored towards a half century and put the Kiwis in a fantastic position early on. Things would go from bad to worse for the Aussies just when they thought they'd finally picked up the big wicket of Miles. The umpire intervened as Arnold had overstepped the mark. Miles would go on to complete a magnificent half century to single-handedly breathe new life into the Kiwis campaign. Miles would make his way to 58 before succumbing to the Aussie skipper. The Aussies finally seeing the back of Miles, but not before some serious damage was done. Shane Louis was the next man to the crease, and he looked to carry on the positive attitude for the Kiwis this morning, as he would quickly make his way to 16 before skying an Alex Stepien delivery over the fence become his first wicket of the tournament. That would bring yesterday's shining light Sam Fastia to the crease, and he picked up where he left off in yesterday's test match, as he would punish some wayward Aussie bowling to all parts of the WCG. Fastia's knock of 37 pushed the Kiwis well beyond the 100 mark, with 8 wickets still in the shed, and the Aussies were staring down the barrel. His knock would come to an end, looking to get the run rate ticking further as he hit Daniel Arnold over the fence. Simon McFarlane's stay at the crease was a brief one, as he had to go for 4. That would bring Satch Pryor to the crease, who set about putting the final touches on the New Zealand innings with some brilliant stroke play. Pryor would rocket his way to 26, pushing the Kiwis beyond 150, before he too succumbed over the fence to young Nathan Hancock. The Kiwi innings fell away in the final overs, the Aussies taking 4 for 3 in the final 12 balls of the innings, with the Aussie skipper picking up 3 for himself in the final over of the innings. But despite the late fight back, the Kiwis were still firmly in the box seat. So the Blackyards registered the highest ever limited over score seen at the WCG, as they registered 9 for 165 after their 20 overs. Henry Miles at the top of the order, leading the way with 58, as the Aussies now had a stern test ahead of them. It was Michael Johnson promoted to the top of the order as a pinch hitter for the Aussies, and he would get the Aussies off to a flyer until he didn't. He would nick off 2 balls later for 4, which would bring Daniel Arnold to the crease, and in his first stick for the tournament, he would begin in positive fashion, taking a specific liking to the Kiwi skipper, taking 14 off his over. But that's where the fun would end for Arnold, as he was clean bowled by Satch Pryor for 14. That would bring the Aussie skipper to the crease, and if ever they needed a captain's knock, it was now, and the innings would begin positively for Scott, although he would give a sharp chance to the Kiwis the very next ball, which they couldn't take. A missed opportunity for the Kiwis to really drive the knife into the Aussies, and the skipper set about making them pay as he began to settle into his innings. Some poor Kiwi fielding was helping the Aussie skipper get into his groove, and the Aussies weren't shy of letting the Kiwis know about it. Things began to look ominous for the Kiwis. As Scott was moving towards a half century, he would have to survive a massive shout here from the Kiwis, but the replays would suggest that the umpire made the right decision. Scott was dragging his side back into the contest as the deficit would shrink to under 100, and the alarm bells were ringing for the Kiwis. That is, until this. An absolute bullet from Henry Miles, pinning the Aussie skipper, who had to go for 44, which would prove to be the beginning of the end for the Aussies. Nathan Hancock had to go for a duck, becoming Simon McFarlane's first wicket of the tour. And when it rains, it pours for the Kiwis, McFarlane picking up his second wicket in the same over. And when El Basher fell for 4, all hope looked lost for the Aussies. Brief cameos at the end from George Paneros and Alex Stepien, adding some respectability to the total. But the end would come with Stepien advancing at that man Henry Miles, who fittingly took the final wicket to seal the Kiwi victory. So the Blackyards roaring back into this Trans-Tasman series as they dismissed Australia for 124 in the run chase, prevailing by 41 runs, as the Kiwis would send a counterpunch to the Aussies that they were here to play. So that reduced the deficit to just 2 points in the total points tally. The Aussies would take a 6-4 lead with them into the second one-day international. However, the Kiwis had just made a huge statement that they were a force to be reckoned with. The toss had proved crucial so far in this year's tournament, and it was the Aussies who would win the toss this time around, and they would bat first. The Aussies would make 3 changes to the side that was hammered in the first one-day international. Matt White, Ryan Schaefer and Justin Brooke returned for the Aussies. with Nathan Hancock, Michael Johnson and Josh Bolling omitted from the squad. And it was as you were for the Kiwis, who were entering this second one-day international full of confidence. So a huge second one-day international was ready to get underway. The Aussie skipper would take the responsibility at the top of the order and would begin brightly, but his innings wouldn't last much longer. The Aussie skipper gone cheaply, and the Kiwis were sky high. That would bring Ryan Schaefer to the crease for his first stick of the day and would be given a life early on, although it was a tough chance here for Lambert. Schaefer would set about making the most of it as he got the innings back on track for the Aussies. Schaefer was at his aggressive best as he pounced on anything loose. It wasn't all brute force though. No matter where the Kiwis put the fieldsman, Schaefer was able to find the gap on his way to 35 before the softest of dismissals brought about the end of his innings. That would bring the Aussie hero from day one, Matt White, to the crease, and unfortunately, lightning does strike twice. White strangled down the leg side once again, this time for just one, as there would be no repeat of his heroics from the previous day. And when Justin Brooke went for a second successive duck in the series, the Aussies had slumped to 4 for 46. But that would bring Hamid Al-Basha to the crease, who set about the rescue mission for the Aussies, as he would play one of the most important knocks of his career to get the Aussies back on track. He took a particular liking to Sam Fastia, taking 12 off his over before feasting on some poor Kiwi bowling through the middle overs to get his side back in the contest. Al-Basha would make his way to 38 before succumbing to the Kiwi skipper Viggo Rasmussen to become his first scout for the match, as the Kiwis would find themselves back on top. Their position solidified with this moment of brilliance. A brilliant team play saw the end of Daniel Arnold for a duck. First Satch Pryor with some brilliant athleticism, and then the brilliant pick up and take had the Kiwis cock a hoop and the Aussies in trouble at 6 for 91. A boundary to young Daniel Hancock took the Aussie score beyond the 100 mark, but when he perished 2 balls later, the Aussies were 7 for 101. George Paneros would be the next man to the crease, and what would prove an invaluable knock at the end of the innings, he would push the Aussies up to a respectable total. Paneros would hit 5 fours and 1 6 in his knock of 28 to push the Aussies beyond 130. However, looking for runs in the final over of the innings, he would succumb over the fence to the bowling of Shane Louis, but not before an important stand to give the Aussies hope. Alex Stepien hitting a 6 in the final over to push the Aussies towards 140 to give the Aussies some momentum. So in a seesawing opening innings of this fixture, the Aussies would limp their way to 8 for 137 after their 20 overs. Hamid Al-Basha, Ryan Schaefer and George Paneros with important contributions. However, given the Kiwis' last start with the bat, they'd be reasonably confident going into this run chase. It would be Henry Miles entrusted with getting the Kiwis off to a good start once again, and that's exactly what he did. He would pick up where he left off in the first one-day international, as the Kiwis were off to another flyer, and the alarm bells would have been ringing for the Aussies, as things just weren't going their way early on. That is until Justin Brooke, who had had a quiet tournament up until this point, picked up the big wicket of Miles, as he had to go for a brisk 16. But it didn't get any easier for the Aussies, as that wicket would bring Sam Fastia to the crease. He would continue the aggressive approach from the Kiwis, as he would punish just about anything loose from the Australian bowlers. Fastia was doing it easy, aided by some poor Aussie bowling. He would make his way into the 30s and would take the Kiwis beyond 50, as everything seemed to be going his way. That is until a rare loose stroke brought about his downfall, as Fastia had to depart for a well-made 30. That would bring Jimmy Calder to the crease, and he would continue the aggression for the Kiwis. Anything over pitch was getting punished, as the Kiwis moved along to 2 for 84 and were on track for victory. Calder would make his way to 21 before a big wicket for youngster Daniel Hancock, whose first wicket for the series was timely. But the Kiwis would continue to creep closer and closer to the target as Satch Pryor came to the crease, and with his odd share of luck would take the Kiwis beyond the 100 mark and on track for victory. The Aussies needed someone to stand up, and it would be the skipper who would pick up the big wicket of Pryor as he lobbed one to Ryan Schaefer at cover. The Aussies seeing the back of the dangerous Satch Pryor for 18, and with 36 to get, the game was still in the balance. Even more so when Scott picked up Tamati Camp in the same over, and the Kiwis would begin to fall in a heap. Shane Louis was dismissed by Schaefer in the very next over, and when Justin Brooke knocked over Simon McFarlane to pick up his third for the match, the Kiwis had lost 5 for 8 and the pendulum swung towards the Aussies. It was all down to the Kiwi skipper, who was the last man at the crease, and needing 25 to win, he would ride his luck in the penultimate over of the innings to get his side within striking distance. The game was on a knife's edge as we entered the final over, 12 to get. Rasmussen could only pick out the Aussie skipper, who took a comfortable catch to seal a win for the ages for the Aussies, and the Kiwis could only wonder how they let this one slip. So the Kiwis losing 7 for 21 at the back end of the innings to snatch defeat from the jaws of victory, as they went down by 11 runs to the Aussies in the second one-day international in a seesawing encounter that would be remembered for some time. The Aussies would now move to a 10-4 lead in this year's Trans-Tasman series as they move to within one win of sealing a historic series victory. So no room for error for the Kiwis as we moved into the 5-over leg of the series, and it began positively for the tourists as they won the toss and elected to bat. So the squad split in half for these 5-over internationals. The Aussies looking to go for the jugular with a series victory in sights. Scott would lead the lineup with Matt White, Ryan Schaefer, Justin Brooke and Alex Stepien rounding out the lineup. And as for the Kiwis, they'd be skippered by Tamati Camp in this must-win fixture as Shane Louis, James Calder, Henry Miles and Satch Pryor took their places. So the Kiwis needed to be flawless in their favourite format of the series, and Henry Miles would continue his impressive limited overs leg of the series as he got the Kiwis off to another flyer, taking 16 from Stepien's opening over. However, Stepien would have the final say. The Aussies picking up the big wicket of Miles for 16. But that would bring James Calder to the crease, who ramped up the aggression, taking a particular liking to Justin Brooke as he dealt in boundaries. Calder would take 24 off the solitary Justin Brooke over, whose heroics with the ball in the second one-day international were quickly being forgotten as Calder was putting him to the sword. The Kiwis opting to take Matt White for the double runs power play over, and it proved to be an inspired decision as Calder was on a mission. Nothing was going right for the Aussies as they began to falter in the afternoon sun. This was the Kiwis' preferred format of the series, and they were teaching the Aussies a backyard cricketing lesson. Calder made his way to 60 before succumbing to Brendan Scott in the 4th over of the innings. However, not before serious damage was done. The Aussies would rally at the back end of the innings, Ryan Schaefer picking up Satch Pryor and Shane Louis in the final over. Tamati Camp would hit the final ball of the innings to the boundary to round off a dream performance for the Kiwis. So the Blackyards would finish with a mammoth 4 for 88 off their 30 deliveries, thanks largely to Jimmy Calder, who made 60 of his own to put the heat right back on the hosts. It was going to take something special for the Aussies to seal a series victory in this one. The Aussie skipper was warmly welcomed to the middle, but after deciding to take the power play in the opening over, his stay was brief. The Aussie skipper dismissed by his opposition number for a duck, and the Kiwis were on the march. And things would go from bad to worse for the Aussies, as Matt White was run out in the second over for just 4, and the Aussies were in big trouble. Ryan Schaefer was seemingly the last hope for the Aussies and would begin his innings positively. However, the Aussies would struggle to find the boundary as the run rate skyrocketed. And when Schaefer was clean bowled by Miles in the advance for looking for quick runs, the Aussies' hope for victory had all but ended. Alex Steppin would come out and hit the top score for the Aussies, but it would all prove to be academic. Steppin would look good for his 16 to put some sort of respectability back on the Aussie total. But when he was dismissed, the game would peter out and the Kiwis had recorded a massive victory. So the Blackyards had spoiled the party for the Aussies as they hammered Australia by 52 runs in this first 5-over international to signal that they were not just not done, but just beginning in this series. So a mammoth victory closed the gap for the Kiwis to just 1 point, and although the Aussies were still one victory away from claiming the series, the Kiwis were coming home with a wet sail. So we moved on to a huge second 5-over international, and for the first time in the series, the Kiwis won back-to-back tosses. So the Kiwis electing to bat first once again, and they will be led by their skipper Viggo Rasmussen. He would be joined by Sam Fastia, Blake Lambert, Logan Strange and Simon McFarlane. And as for the Aussies, they would be skippered by Rabi El-Basha. He'd be joined by his brother Hamid El-Basha, with Daniel Arnold, Michael Johnson and George Paneros rounding out the side for the Aussies. So if you thought there was drama in the last fixture, you hadn't seen nothing yet. Sam Fastia would get the innings underway for the Kiwis, and just as he had for most of the series, began in positive fashion. The Aussies began poorly with the ball, and they were paying the price at the hand of Sam Fastia's blade, as the man from Taranaki was beginning to go through the gears. Fastia would take 36 off the double runs power play over to have the Kiwis in another commanding position, as Sam Fastia would move to his second half century of the series. The Aussies were not helping themselves in the field, as the Kiwis were running riot in this 5-over leg of the series. Fastia would carry his bat through the innings in one of the best knocks ever seen at the WCG to have the Kiwis on the brink of a series lead, and all the Aussies could do was pay homage. So Sam Fastia carrying his bat to finish 84 not out in what was a simply devastating innings from the Kiwi, as the tourists finished no wicket for 86 after their 30 deliveries, and the Aussies were staring down the barrel of coughing up the series lead. It was going to take something special for the Aussies, however it was a nightmare start. Hamid El-Basha, promoted to the top of the order, could manage just one. That would bring Daniel Arnold to the crease, and with the run rate climbing, he began in necessary aggressive fashion as he began the fight back for the Aussies. Arnold would seemingly have the Aussies back on track as they would decide to take the power play over, but disaster on the first delivery. Arnold skying one over the fence to that man Sam Fastia, and he had to go for 18. Michael Johnson walked in the power play over, and he had to go from ball 1, and he would continue the resurgence for the Aussies. He would take 30 from the remainder of the Sam Fastia over to get the Aussies back into the contest. In one of the most important knocks of his career, he would make his way to 40 before once again the pendulum swung. The Aussies 3 for 65 when George Paneros made his way to the crease, and things were getting tense as the deficit was beginning to close. 15 required from the final over, and after serving up a wide with the first delivery, the pressure was on Lambert. The Aussies had moved to within just one hit of a series victory. George Paneros, the hero for the Aussies, as pandemonium erupted. The Aussies had completed another famous victory when all seemed lost. George Paneros finishing 19 not out to seal the Trans-Tasman series for the Aussies, and despair for the tourists. So in quite an amazing contest, the Aussies prevailed by 2 wickets. Michael Johnson top scoring with 40 and George Paneros 19 not out to get the Aussies home. And once again the Kiwis were left to wonder how they could let this one slip through their fingers. That propelled the Aussies to an unassailable 15-9 lead in the series with 1 game to play in what had been simply an amazing series. With the final match being a dead rubber, the fans were allowed to take part in this one, and the Kiwis prevailed to bring the final points tally to 15-14 in Australia's favour. Sam Fassier was named Player of the Series, amassing over 200 runs. Memories and friendships built for a lifetime, as the Aussies were crowned champions on the international stage at the first time of asking.